While the Kremlin is throwing a diplomatic tantrum, trying to intimidate Kyiv with systematic strikes, Ukraine's defense forces are making it clear to all of Moscow's allies that the days of playing a one-sided game are over. The commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, Robert Magyar Brovdy, delivered an unprecedented and tough address to the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. Magyar directly warned the Minsk dictator that Ukraine already has the first 500 strategic targets on Belarusian territory listed on paper. If Lukashenko gives in to Putin's pressure and makes a foolish move, the response from the unmanned systems forces will be immediate and devastating. What are these 500 targets? Why is the Kremlin once again trying to stretch our resources along the northern border? And how are Ukrainian drones ready to rewrite the rules of the game for Minsk? Let's break down all the details. Well, you'll find more details in our report. You're watching the Glavred channel. I'm your host, Yevhen Serov. If you find this content informative, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates. The individual who was famously seen showing maps where the alleged attack on Belarus was supposedly being prepared is actually proving to be completely incapable of taking any meaningful action at this time. Meanwhile, the newly established Ukrainian unmanned systems forces are continuing to demonstrate their growing strategic importance and operational capabilities on the modern battlefield. It's a predatory bird that operates quietly, precisely, and lethally. A quote from the commander of the unmanned systems forces: "The first 500 targets are already on paper." A free and very practical piece of advice: don't get in Ukraine's way. What do these 500 targets mean in the context of the unmanned systems forces capabilities as of May this year? This is not just an abstraction. The targets are airfields from which Russian MiGs can take off, oil refineries in Mazir and Novopolotsk, key supply hubs, military bases, and ammunition depots. The commander made it clear, if even a single Belarusian soldier or another Russian train crosses the border, all of the military and critical infrastructure of the Lukashenko regime will go up in flames within a matter of hours. So why is this topic being brought up again? It resurfaced at the end of May. The situation was explained in detail by military expert and former SBU officer Stupak. According to intelligence, the Kremlin is now exerting unprecedented, downright suffocating pressure on Lukashenko. Putin is desperate to drag the Belarusian army into the war. Why does Moscow need this? It's all very straightforward. There is a failure on the main front. Since the Russian spring offensive has completely run out of steam and the Ukrainian armed forces are successfully counterattacking. In the Orekov direction near Stepnogorsk, Putin needs new reserves and a strategy to stretch resources. The Kremlin is using even the prospect of Belarus entering the war as a tool of psychological pressure. Moscow wants to force the Ukrainian General Staff to withdraw combat-ready air defense brigades and those very drone forces from Donbas and Zaporizhzhia and redeploy them to the north. Stupak reminds us that exactly the same tactic. Russia tried to use this tactic when Ukrainian forces were conducting an operation in the Kursk region. But Kyiv saw through this maneuver, and instead of simply keeping troops on the defensive, Ukraine deployed a technological shield and sword in the form of UAV systems. What do you think? Will Lukashenko dare to go all in after such a direct and tough warning from Magyar, or will the Minsk dictator? He'll find another 100 reasons to keep dodging and not get directly involved in a war against Ukraine. Share your opinion in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to the channel.
And to wrap up the topic, they say Putin has another double now nicknamed Kartavy. He definitely has trouble with the letter R.
Loudly, so that they can hear him. Hooray, 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 well...
In general, the point is clear. The real Putin, terrified, is sitting there in his bunker and keeps making a mess. And not just for himself, but for the whole world. So in the Kremlin, they announced that Russia has reported its first case of transferring nuclear weapons. Military units during exercises where? That's right, in Belarus.
A sudden inspection of the nuclear forces was conducted. The troops and forces have been brought to combat readiness. Full combat readiness. The delivery and issuance of nuclear warheads to Russian and Belarusian units designated for the combat use of nuclear weapons has been carried out. Well,
yeah, Gerasimov is theatrically reporting to Putin on camera about the super scary nuclear weapon in Belarus. And then this kind of info pops up like, supposedly that nuclear weapon has already exploded.
Monitoring channels spread information about an alleged disaster and nuclear explosion in Belarus. According to their information, during joint nuclear exercises between Minsk and Moscow, something exploded in Belarus. An Iskander-M, possibly with a nuclear warhead, right on the launch pad.
Well, in the end, it all turned out to be fake, although it was quite believable. But what's important is something else. Amid reports about a new offensive from Belarus, Lukashenko, as always, starts by showing off. So we have such weapons that Kyiv could be taken in 3 days at the very least.
We absolutely do not threaten anyone, but we have such weapons and we are ready to defend our motherland by all means. From Brest to Vladivostok, it's our joint effort. And we will do everything necessary to protect it.
Then Zelensky takes the floor and says, Grigorich, come on, calm down, okay? Because if the Ukrainian armed forces start hitting the military targets in your Belarus, your mustache will fly off.
We also have the capability to act preemptively against Russian territories. A threat could come from there. And as for the leadership of Belarus, they need to stay alert, meaning they should realize there will be consequences if there are aggressive actions against Ukraine, against our people.
And here Lukashenko realizes that things are starting to smell like trouble. He says, "You misunderstood me, I want to meet with Zelensky in person." Volodya, calm down, I have nothing to do with this.
Volodymyr Zelensky needs to calm down, reconsider, analyze the situation in Ukraine itself and at the front and draw the appropriate correct conclusions. If he wants to talk about something, consult, or maybe something else, please, we are open to that. In any part of Ukraine or Belarus, I am ready to meet with him and discuss the issues of Belarusian-Ukrainian relations.
Can you even imagine what would happen to Putin if all of a sudden Zelensky and Lukashenko actually held a personal meeting, a tete-a-tete? Putin will get jealous. After all, he and Lukashenko have these so-called eternal marital games.
No, we weren't the ones who attacked them. We didn't start shooting preemptively at Sulu when just 2 days before we were at your place.
You know what I want to tell you, quite seriously, it's better to overestimate your enemy than to underestimate them. Yes, I understand that Lukashenko is in for a complete disaster if, God forbid, even a single soldier from his side, from his border, crosses into Ukrainian territory again. But you know, on the other hand, we all remember perfectly well that in 2022, hardly anyone could have predicted this either. That's why it's better to prepare for the worst so that everything turns out well.
According to analysts, this is how Alexander Grigorievich is trying to prove to the Russian president his involvement in his activities and once again to scare the Baltic countries. But
in general, I want to tell you that Putin is objectively inadequate on all fronts. Period. Present your point of view in a more conceptual way.
The Kremlin is preparing to escalate the war against Ukraine. Among the possible options being considered by the aggressor country is an attempt to launch an offensive in the north of the country from the territory of Belarus. As reported by Union, the possibility of such a scenario is mentioned in particular by serviceman Ihor Lutsenko. He notes that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin might take such a step to create an image for the US and China, and also allows for the possibility of intensified attacks on Kyiv.
If they start terrorizing Kyiv with missiles, it will be a completely different situation compared to what they're doing now by launching Shahed drones. And if it turns into a cheap, massive, and constant act of terror, at the very least, it will make for a good image for the Chinese and the Americans alike. See, we are still capable of something.
At the same time, Major General retired of the Security Service of Ukraine, Viktor Yahun, believes that an invasion from Belarus is, at this point, purely a theoretical scenario. According to him, if it does happen, there are 4 key directions. These are the Rivne nuclear power plant, Kovel, cutting off the 2 main highways, the Warsaw route and the highway, Kyiv Chop, or possibly a repeat of the invasion through the Chernobyl zone towards Kyiv. At the same time, Yahun believes that an offensive on Kyiv is unlikely. After all, the Belarusian army barely numbers 50,000 people. Another restraining factor is the tightening of sanctions, the lifting of which Russia is trying to achieve.
This is schizophrenia. You understand? The enemy understands that as soon as they cross the border into Ukraine, that's the end. Sanctions won't just be doubled or tripled, the sanctions will become instantly brutal.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke about the potential escalation by Russia in the northern direction. According to him, intelligence data confirms this. The head of state emphasized that Ukrainian special services and partners continue to closely monitor the situation around the northern border.